Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thanks, Global Patties. You know, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and you know we'd rather get right to talking about beekeeping. However, our sponsors are critical to help making all this happen. From hosting fees to software to hardware to microphones to weekly monthly subscriptions, everything, they help each episode happen. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is a quarterly magazine dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with a number 2. And also check out the new 2 Million Blossoms, the podcast, available from the 2 Million Blossoms website or from wherever you download and stream your shows. Hey, everybody. Thanks for sticking through all of that, and thanks for joining us. We're truly happy you're here. Hey, Kim, how are your bees doing?
Well, my bees are doing good, Jeff. But I want to mention one thing first is that I've been hearing from some of our sponsors that they're getting a lot of attention from our listeners. So,
fantastic.
Listeners, we appreciate the fact that you are responding to this, and I'm glad our sponsors are happy with us.
Yeah, that's good news.
My bees, I harvested this week.
Oh, wow.
I didn't harvest much because I had to share what I got from the good ones with the ones that weren't so good. So I left I left more of it out there than I took home, but I did okay. And we're going to finish getting them ready for bed now in another week or so and call it a season.
Well, you use, last week we talked about it, but did you use your leaf blower?
I did. It's just really fast. And I went over and helped a friend, and my friend harvests honey by pulling a frame and knocking the bees off at the front door. And it takes them a month to harvest honey because and there's bees in the air. So I went over to help him. And this time I took my blower and a mile of electric cord, and we were done in an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope he's listening, because last week after our discussion about the leaf blowers, my question about, I wonder how many cubic feet per minute you need to run a blower to be effective for bees. We received an email from a listener, Tom. I'm going to mess up your last name, Tom. Tom Minoso, Tom M. And he heard the question, and he suggests a Ryobi 18-volt battery-powered blower. He says it has a airspeed up to 160 miles an hour and a 3-speed variable trigger. He says it's the best blower for bees. So, well, not that we sell Ryobi blowers, but just in case any other beekeepers are out there wondering what blower would be good, this is the one Tom recommends. So thanks a lot, Tom, for listening, and thanks for sending in an email.
Yeah, that company does a good job. I've got a push lawnmower that runs on a battery and a weed trimmer that runs on the same battery. And I think I'm going to look at this leaf blower.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. And I did look at it online, and it's reasonably priced at under $55. So, you know, that's a couple bottles of bee robbers, or honey robbers. So it might be worthwhile.
And no smell.
No smell. You don't have to worry about your tracking that stuff into the house within your shoes. Hey, Kim, remember last January, we had Dr. Marla Spivak on the episode, I think it's episode 33, talking about propolis.
Yeah, she did a good job. And Well, she's always a good guest. She's just
Oh,
I've known her since she's been at Minnesota, and I always enjoy working with her.
Oh, I just like so many people, I just kind of just enjoy being in her presence. Well, she's on a podcast, or she has a story on a national podcast. It's Wait What's Meditative Story, and she talks about how she got started in bees. And this was featured on the October 13th episode of Wait What's Meditative Story, and the story is titled "How the Bees Saved Me," and it talks about her early days as a researcher in the Peruvian jungles, and where she apparently got really sick, and the bees helped her come through it. So it's a personal beekeeping story. It's set to calming music, and of course Marla's narration. So we'll have that also in our show notes. I encourage our listeners to go check it out.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to listen to it, but it's next on my list.
Yeah, it's well worth it. Hey, Kim, we've been asking people to send us email, and this last couple of weeks, we have, in fact, the episode with Dara Scott from Hive Alive generated several emails.
Yeah, I got one here from Blaine N., and he writes, I just finished listening to your episode on Hive Alive, and then I checked some other sources about seaweed and the things that go with it, and found that some people aren't as impressed with the data as you were. And the other places I checked said feeding bananas to bees seems to have some dubious scientific support. So what am I missing? Well, you want to hear what I wrote back?
Yeah, it sounds like he's missing a good meal, but go ahead.
Blaine, I don't think you're missing anything. We try to, rather than promote the people, organizations, or products we discuss, our intent is to introduce our listeners to the sources of information that are out there. We invite discussions, even disagreements with our guests, so that, like this, all or at least more sides are explored. When new or different management techniques or products are introduced, it is good that objective researchers offer opinions or research results to share, but without discussions from both sides, potential users would only have some of the information. Blaine, thanks for your inquiry, and we'll take a look at some of that other research out there that kind of disagrees with this, and we'll see what we can find.
Yeah, it's a good discussion. And, well, just on the opposite side of that coin, and the next day, we received this email from Amanda. She doesn't provide a last name or a initial, but she writes this, she says, and I'm going to paraphrase this in part. She says, I just want to say thank you. I very much enjoyed your episodes, and particularly the scientists who come on. She writes about how her sheep feed on seaweed and uses it as a fruit tree spray, and how she presses seaweed meal into the bee frames. And she writes saying that the bees really seem to like it. She goes on to write that her bees are consistently healthier than anyone else's she knows. Amanda states that she is a naturopath with 4 years of clinical nutrition and a horticulturist with an advanced diploma in agronomy. And she believes seaweed and microbes are part of a holistic management approach that are two very different important elements in their vitality. She writes that Dr. Dara is on spot in that all beekeepers should address nutrition and gut health as a priority and a base on which to build other aspects of bee health like immunity or varroa treatment. Gut health and good nutrition are two sides of the same coin, inseparable from each other. Science requires empirical approach, but nature delivers holistically. Look to nature to heal nature. And Amanda ends with, and this is my best part of the email, you guys rock. So, that's... Thanks, Amanda. So it's interesting, two different viewpoints of the same topic.
Yeah, I'll go back to Steve Rapasky. He's got a phrase that beekeeping, there's a science and application to beekeeping. And the science is pretty straightforward, and the application kind of, moves around a little bit, but it moves around using the science that you're applying to it. And this is kind of the same thing, I think. Yeah. It seems the seaweed stuff has got something going for it, and I'm looking for it in the grocery store.
Yeah. I think we'll find more and more as time goes on about what's available out in the world that provides to be useful for beekeepers and people alike.
And well, thanks for the email, Amanda. We appreciate your comments and the fact that there's another side to this story.
And to Blaine, too, because I appreciate people challenging what we have on the show, and all the emails and will help us improve the podcast. So thanks. So Kim, what do you have coming up on Honeybee Obscure with Jim 2?
Well, we just did waxing and waning, which is kind of the beekeepers who reach a spot in their life where do I want to keep doing this? And that was a little bit of soul searching there, because neither Jim or I are spring chickens anymore. And some days that box gets heavier and heavier and heavier, and you kind of wonder if I should be doing this. But what we've got coming up is we're going to look again at winter prep. And what we're looking at here is some specifics on wrapping and winter protection. Everything from windbreaks to, styrofoam sheets on the side and everything in between. And then the next one, a week after that, we took a good hard look at bottom boards. There's more there than you might imagine. And you can do things that will make your hive even better protected in the winter if you consider your bottom board part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
So it's more than just a place to set your hive.
Yep. A lot more.
Well, and I encourage anybody to take a look at the latest Honeybee Obscure, the Honeybee Obscure with waxing and waning, and see if you can guess who that beekeeper is in the picture.
I'll never tell.
So, Kim, have you ever wished that you could just push a button or ask Siri to manage your bees? Well, today's guest and his company have developed the next best thing, a completely automated or robotized beekeeping management system. Saar Safar from Beewise will be here to talk about automated beekeeping.
I got to tell you, this waxing and waning thing, having a robot take care of my bees is really attractive. So I'm ready.
Well, you could have C-3PO to go out and harvest your honey.
Well,
we're almost there. All right, well, let's talk to Saar. But first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbials Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, everybody. And while you're at the Strong Microbial site, make sure you go out and click on The Hive, their regular newsletter full of useful bee information and product updates. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Beekeeping Today podcast. Sitting across the virtual table right now from us is Saar Safar from Beewise. Beewise is a brand new company that's providing beekeeping and pollination services. Saar, welcome to the Beekeeping Today podcast. Looking forward to talking to you.
Thank you.
It's nice to meet you, Saar. I've been reading a lot about your company, Beewise, and what you've got, this automated house that you've got set up that takes care of itself in 24 colonies. Why don't you tell us a little bit of how you got into this and why, and a little bit about the Beewise company?
Fantastic. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on the show. I know your show is pretty adopted among the beekeepers community, so it's exciting to be here, and I'm an honor. Personally, I'm more of a entrepreneur, maybe even a serial entrepreneur. So this is company number 6 for me. I had 5 previous iterations, none of which were related to bees. But this time around, I met a few years back. I met a pretty amazing individual. His name is Elia, and Elia was a beekeeper. I mean, he still is a commercial one, and he worked in a commercial operation of a few thousand hives. And he had this idea of real-time intervention. He has this theory that our inability to intervene in real time, think about intensive beekeeping, but in real time, at every hive, 24/7, but he didn't really know how to go about it. So he had the idea, he had some creative ideas in his mind on how to build it or what to do. But when we met, we started kind of putting a plan together on how to go about and building not only a product, but a company around it. So support systems and customer service systems and operational systems, and how do you build and manufacture and deliver. There's a lot of layers to being able to eventually provide service. And so that was about 4 years ago. And since then, we've founded Beewise and had this, right now we're at iteration number 18 of our solution. Iteration number 19 is coming out in the next 45 to 60 days. And so we iterate all the time to provide a better solution and fine tune it to kind of perfect it to what beekeepers need.
Oh, an agile approach.
Well, in looking at your webpage, and as I understand it, this is a single unit that holds a couple of dozen hives, in not hives per se, not boxes, but the equivalent of 24 hives that are you hitch up and put it wherever you want it, and then but inside everything is automated. How does that work?
Before you get into that, describe the unit itself so our listeners can visualize what your product is.
So visualize 24 hives or 24 colonies and hives, and putting them 12 on each side of a big box. And in the center, there's a corridor with a small robot. And don't think about, Star Wars robotics. It's a pretty simple, mechanical apparatus that slides on tracks and can monitor and inspect the hives from within. So our hives, they don't open up from the top. They open up from within the device. And so the robot can actually look inside every hive and inspect every single frame and identify in real time what is going on with that frame, and identify brood and pollen and honey and nectar and different disease that the bees have. It can identify varroa if it finds any, ferrotic, or even inside the actual cells. And so from an inspection standpoint, think of it as it's as if every hive had their own beekeeper 24/7. The robot goes back and forth on the rail, goes up and down, and inspects all the hives all the time at any given time. Now, the inspection is pretty cool because think about how hives are being inspected today. You go to the field, put on your protective gear. Some do, some don't. And then you open up the hatch of the entire hive, and light comes in, and cold air comes in, and the pheromones go out. It's a significant distraction for the bees. In our case, the whole device is darkened out. It's sealed, so no light comes in. And the robot inspects every frame separately, and it doesn't take out the bees. If it needs to take out a frame, it takes out the frames without the bees. So that for the bees, for the colony, it's a non-event. The colony doesn't even know that something is going. Yeah, one of the frames moved, but the bees didn't leave the colony. The queen didn't leave the colony. Now they have a little bit of more room until the frame comes back in. It takes the robot 3 minutes to take a frame and 3 minutes to put it back. So it's very slow. It's very gentle. The robot is very patient. It never goes on vacation. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't complain. That's the beauty of it. So you can do a very consistent method of beekeeping that is always the same at a very high level without worrying about costs or just the soft aspects of managing labor.
So it's kind of like and we've talked to people on the show that have AZ hives and AZ huts. So in some ways, this is kind of like an AZ hive hut with hives entrances to the outside of the container on either side. You said there's 12 colonies on each side, and the robot in between, much like a tape storage unit, and from a data processing standpoint, you have like an old storage type tape server, is how I'm visualizing it.
You're absolutely right. If you step into our device, it looks like a bookstore. Looks like
Yeah.
all these books one next to each other. And then there's just a robotic system that goes and takes out a book and looks at that book from both sides, inspects the book. Takes it about 3 minutes to take it out and put it back in. Again, by design. And then we know everything, right? And the robot, now there's another layer. So that's the mechanical aspect of the solution. Now there's another layer of artificial intelligence. So there's today the way to implement artificial intelligence is to create neural networks. So there's neural networks that are sitting in the cloud, and they get all this data. They get the video feeds and the images and the temperature measurements and the humidity measurements and the sound measurements. All this data goes up to the cloud. And there's a neural network that is able to convert all that data into meaningful data sets. So when you look at a frame, you see how much brood there's there. You see if the brood is proper and if it's healthy. You see if there's holes in the brood. You can see how much pollen, how much honey, capped honey, and uncapped honey. The artificial intelligence can see all that and can convert all that into data and can report back to you and tell you, Kim, on frame 17 in Hive 3, 71% is capped brood, 9% is uncapped brood. There's a little bit of pollen and it's all wrapped up with some capped honey. And now you can actually know exactly what is going on every frame in your 24 colonies at any given time throughout the year without having to visit your hives even once. You can be in Hawaii on vacation and manage your hives in California. So, and again, I'll just add one more thing to that. That's the inspection component, right? So now you can inspect and and it's not inference. You're not inferring that because of a certain sound or because of a certain temperature, something is going on. You actually see, just like a beekeeper would do inspection with their own eyes, the neural network is actually much better than a beekeeper in the field because it doesn't have protective gear. It doesn't have all the bees around it. It's not sweaty because of heat or it's not cold. It sees the perfect image, the resolution, the level of data, the level of resolution you get is incredible. And so now the data is there. Now there's another layer. So we said the mechanical layer of obtaining the data. There's a software layer of actually interpreting the data into actionable pieces of information, right, that you can understand. And now there's another layer of another mechanical system that actually treats the bees per what we've learned from the data. So the robot can see, for example, can understand that it's too hot. You're in Arizona, you're in California, you're even in North Dakota, and you get a really heat wave, and now you need to cool down the hive. Or you're actually North Dakota during the winter. You're overwintering in our devices. You need to keep the device. You let it go down to, let's say, 40, 35, but you don't want to let it go even further down, or maybe not even 35. The beekeeper can set the ranges they like. And so now there's actions that the device takes to provide a better environment for the bees.
So the photo or the picture that your robot gets is able to tell the robot to what level. For instance, could it spot and do something about a drone-laying queen?
Yeah.
So it would tell you that you have this many frames of drone brood. Would it know that it had a drone-laying queen, or would you have to interpret that?
No, once you know that, think about the nice thing about our profession, right? Beekeeping is that it's been around for millennia. And so the know-how is already there. So how would you know if there's a drone laying queen, right? You'd count the drones. There's a method to that.
Okay.
So it's very easy. Yeah, it's the same method. Let's even take a little bit of a more difficult kind of situation to identify, right? What about superseder cells versus queen cells, right? Let's say you're in high season and you start seeing these swarm cells popping up. Same thing, right? The robot identifies them. They're very visible. They're very obvious. And, if the beekeeper says, hey, don't let my colony swarm between April and July, whatever, right? there's a range you can set in our software, then the robot will pop those queen cells. Just go in and there's a little popper. We have 0 queen cells. If you define this, we have 0% of queen cells during a certain period of time when you want it, because it's very easy to do. How do we do it without a robot? We drive over to the hives, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. We gear up. We take out every frame. We try and find those swarm cells, and we try to pop them with our finger. But nobody really does it because it's not scalable. I mean, if you have 100 hives or 50, fine. But if you have 5,000 hives, it's a very expensive proposition, taking your entire staff every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks to try and prevent swarming from happening. So it's very expensive. So we let them happening, and some swarming happens, right? And so the robot can take care of that. It's very easy. Now, mind you guys that all these actions are not happening in an autonomous fashion. So what happens is we send a beekeeper notification. So you would get, if you're a beekeeper and you're using our system, you would get a notification on your cell phone, right? It says, hey, Hive 17 in colony 7, in device 3, there's 2 swarm cells, and in this, and then you can actually go in and look at those pictures just as if you were in the field. You see the same exact frame as if you were on the field. You identify, and you can decide. You can say, you know what, this queen sucks. Let's just get a new queen in there. Or it's not really a swarm cell; it's a superseder cell. I want this cell. You can decide it, or you can say, hey, get rid of swarm cells. It's one checkbox, and the robot goes in and sweeps 24 colonies.
So you're looking at photographs, and also between the beekeeper who can review photographs and the neural network who is making that decision as well. Is that all visible light? Are you looking at UV light? Are you looking at different kinds of light to make this distinction?
Yeah, different light waves for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Different kind of light waves. Again, there's some things that are patented that I can talk about. Some things are not patented. They're just part of our know-how that I can't really go into detail. But there are different light waves that we use to identify different things, but also to kind of do different layers of imaging. So you don't always identify things with just one layer. You have to add 2, 3, 4 layers. Sometimes we even add more than 10 layers to actually get to the right conclusion and make sure we provide our beekeepers the best recommendations. So as a beekeeper, you eventually get, hey, there's a 95% chance this is a swarm cell. But you can still go in and make your own decision and kind of, carry out your own beekeeping, with your own philosophy, right? We just give you the data and a set of recommendations, or at least conclusions based on the data points we have.
Amazing. One of the other things that it says on your webpage is that you can harvest honey and extract it and put it into a container, and then it will tell you when the container is full and come and get it. How do you manage that?
So Kim, I'll answer your question, but I want to expand on it real for 2 minutes, if you don't mind, because I think there's another angle there. So extracting honey is pretty straightforward. There's an extractor, there's a small centrifuge inside the device and a container. And the robot takes frames that are full of honey. You can tell the robot as a beekeeper, harvest these frames, take frame 1 from hive number 3, take frame 17 from hive number 4, and extract them. And the robot will go in and take out that frame, just like we'll take out a book from a bookshelf, and we'll put it in the centrifuge. Our extractor can harvest 8 frames at a time. It takes about 15 to 17 minutes to extract these frames. And then the robot takes those same frames and puts them back to work. Now, so harvesting is relatively simple, and our harvester is the same one you would see in other places. It's a pretty simple, straightforward mechanism, just like you would see in the centralized facilities, but it doesn't carry 200 frames, it carries 8. And the honey just pours down into a container. And we know, we have a measurable, little apparatus that measures how much the container is full. When it's 80% full, you get a notification, come and empty your container. It can carry about 800 pounds of honey right now, so not too much, but enough to give you a few weeks of honey collection. Now, but I will expand and say the nice thing is that when you can do this, you can start thinking about continuous harvesting. So again, think about commercial beekeeping where you harvest your honey at the end of the season, right? Maybe twice a season at best, because it's a very expensive proposition. You have to go and take all the frames, drive them back to a centralized facility, have a whole facility with a whole team of people. It's just a significant undertaking. Well, when the robot does it frame by frame, you literally harvest, a single frame. We saw even 8 times a season. That same frame, it fills up 2 days later, you harvest it again, fills up, put it back to work, fills up another. And so now we don't have supers. You don't need to have 8 supers on every hive to capture as much honey as you can during the season. You literally capture every drop of honey and you harvest it in real time, but you can do it on a 30 frame colony, 20 frame colony, because your nest, let's say your nest is 10, 15 colonies, and we've seen brood nest of 15 frames. But then the other 5, 10 frames, they fill up honey, you just harvest them. And so the bees always have room to fill up new frames. And so my point is everything is much more dynamic. For example, when a colony wants to grow, it doesn't have to grow by 10 frames because you put up a super. You can add 2, 3 frames at a time. For the bees, it's much easier for the bees to absorb 2, 3 frames, build them out, and start filling them up with brood, larvae, honey, whatever, rather than what you put 10 frames and then they start building all 10 out. It's a much more expensive undertaking for the bees. And again, we're talking about money, and commercial beekeeping is not about just growing the bees because of the love of it. It's how do you make your machine, your business more efficient and effective. So everything here is much more natural for the bees. They build them out 1, 2 frames at a time. You harvest 1 frame at a time, put it back. It just works in a much more fluid manner, if I can use that term.
Interesting. The frames, I imagine they are not really Langstroth hive frames. They're a modified frame specific for the bee house, right? Your unit. Is that correct? And do you start them out on a foundation? Is it a full plastic frame?
So the bee home carries standard deep Langstroth frames, and the population is you take your old frames from your old hives, the plastic frames you used to, and you just move them to our device.
Interesting.
We wrap them up with our interface. Our interface is like a book. It closes on the frame, and it doesn't touch the actual foundation. It just goes around the plastic frame of the frame, if you will. And this is how a robot interacts with this new frame. But the center of the frame, the whole foundation and the build out is the same exact way. And so when you want to migrate and populate our device, you literally take your colonies from your old hives. It takes you about 2 hours to populate our entire device, and you moved all your colonies to our device in a very simplified, streamlined manner. You don't have to grow the colonies from scratch, in our device.
That's very cool.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
You might have stated this earlier. Who is your target customer for your product? It's not the hobbyist beekeeper, but is it the sideliner beekeeper? Is it a commercial beekeeper? And if so, what is the number of hives that you expect a beekeeper to have and to make the most of this?
So, from a product standpoint, anybody who has 24 hives can start using it. It doesn't prevent. But from a value proposition standpoint, the larger your operation, the more difficulties you have managing it in a cost-effective manner, right? Once you start dealing with 30, 40, 20 employees, again, like I said, the soft aspects of managing labor becomes very expensive, right? People go on vacation, they quit, they leave, they go to your competitor. You have to get new people exactly when it's high season. There's nobody around. It's just a much more, the value prop that we provide is incredible when you're dealing with larger operations, because now suddenly, your labor sits behind a desk and makes decisions. We're splitting the expertise of the beekeepers, the know-how, the brain, from the actual manual, mundane labor that carries out the task. And so it doesn't add much value if there's a person harvesting a frame or a robot. It doesn't add much value if there's a person looking with their eyes or a camera looking in the physical aspect of carrying out beekeeping might be fun, you might enjoy it, but it doesn't add a ton of value. What adds value is the expertise of the mind of the person who's carrying out that beekeeping. And that person, she or he, can sit behind a desk and make the same decisions, only they can make much smarter decisions when they do precision beekeeping. They can actually make a decision per frame. You can't really do this in the field. It doesn't work that way. But in an office, you actually can. You can optimize your entire 24 colonies. You can start doing incredible things and make a decision because the cost is very low. It takes you minutes, seconds, right? And so when back to your question about who is it intended for, being a 4-year-old company and a relatively young brand in the market, we have to focus our efforts and try and first find those customers that we provide the most value for, and then kind of go downstream to those that still can get value, but it's not as, I would say, wide and robust as the biggest beekeepers. So we are actually targeting the biggest commercial operations, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 hives, 10,000 hives. And we will go down the scale of operations, but first we have to make sure that this is where we spend our efforts in the next couple of years for sure.
I'm going to bet that with the data that you have and the work that you've done, you can approach one of these people and say, these 24 hives are going to be, in terms of efficiency, labor costs, increased honey production, all of the things that you've incorporated into your system, these 24 hives are going to be as or nearly as productive as some number of hives that you have out in the field that you have to do one at a time with lots and lots of labor and mistakes and transportation time and all of these things. Do you have a feel for that number?
Absolutely. So there's a few numbers, or let's call them KPIs, that we measure that we can kind of report on. So first and foremost, by being able to apply treatment in real time for the bees, you don't get as many losses. You don't get much loss like you get in the field, because again, if there's varroa, we know about it in real time and we treat it in real time. If there's a disease, if it's too cold or too warm, if there's pesticides in the fields, we know about these things in real time. There's sensors on the device, and you can actually sense and know that something's going on. You see, we have entrances for the bees to come in and out for every colony, and on the box, those entrances shut down and open up automatically by the robot. So, for example, when you're mobilizing your device, you don't have to come a night before and wrap up all your hives or whatnot. You can just, at a click of a button from your office at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., you can shut down the whole device. And now it's shut down. All the entrances shut down, and now you can transport it whenever you like. So why am I giving this example? Because I'm trying to tell you that the first metric we're measuring is how do our losses look compared to, the industry benchmark, let's call it that, right? So the industry benchmark is a very high number, above 35, 40. Some report even higher numbers. It's astonishing to me. It's such a bad situation. We don't see losses over years. I mean, we've operated these devices for 3 years now at scale over thousands of colonies. Our average is less than 10%, and that includes summer losses and winter losses. We don't have a lot of overwintering losses. We don't have situations where there's famine because you can feed the bees. And you can see your colonies go down to a very low. Now it costs you money. You have to feed the bees. You have to actually provide the feed, the honey, the syrup, and the patties. But they're in the device. They have special compartments. And now the robot can take a patty and shove it inside a hive. And it can fill. We have feeder frames, just like the regular frames. One of the frames is a feeder frame. Every colony has a feeder frame there. And the robot can fill it up with honey syrup. Now, if your honey syrup container goes down, not honey syrup, your syrup container goes down and it's getting close to empty, 20%, we notify you. So now you go and fill up syrup in your devices or water. And now your whole operation becomes different because, like I told you, let's say you have 30 employees, you're a large operation, let's say 20, 30,000 hives. Now you don't have to guess where the bees need food or whatnot. You know that device 17, device 34, device 55, and device 91 need, sugar or, syrup filling or water filling. And you have an app on your phone and it tells you what's your route. And you go and you take the syrup truck and just fill them up with syrup. Your whole operation becomes different, more efficient, more effective, and much more data driven. That's the important part. Every decision you make is based on data, actionable data that you can interpret and take action on, versus going to right now when they go to the field, you don't really know what you're going to find. Remember, you bring the whole factory with you on your truck. There's everything on the truck. There's new colonies and new queens and food and whatever, because if you already made the trip to the field, you want to make sure that you can treat everything and anything. Well, when it's a data-driven business, you don't need to take all that with you. You know you're going to fill up syrup. That's what you're doing today. And tomorrow, there's a different truck that goes and collects all the honey, or honey from the devices that need to collect the honey. It's just a different way of doing it.
Certainly far more efficient than hoping you got guessed right today when you leave.
This is not pie in the sky. You actually have units in the field working today, right? And across North America?
We do, yes.
And how many units do you have in operation?
There's a couple of dozen. Not all have been delivered. We're still kind of in. Again, look, I want to put things in perspective. We're a small, young company. We're starting out. We have a little over 100 devices scattered in the fields overall. Only a couple of dozen are in California. Not all have been delivered. Some have been delivered. Some are in the process of getting ready to be delivered. Some devices miss some features. So, for example, the harvest system, not everybody has them yet. They will. But this is how we operate, right? We're a product company. Right. So we don't mind putting devices in the field, not with all the features. We will add features as we go.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, it's a very agile approach to the product release.
That's exactly right.
That is making it a viable, important product that's real. Someone can come out and touch it and feel it and see it in operation. It may not be complete, but it's actually working and not just a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Very cool.
Very cool. And just doing some number crunching, I can see that having one of these, having many of these in an operation would save you suddenly many employees. It's going to replace a chunk of the people that you would need to do this kind of work. So not only that, you don't have to train them, and you don't have to worry about taxes, and you don't have to, there's a whole lot of things you don't have to worry about anymore.
Kim, it's funny what you say, because that was actually one of my concerns initially. I was like, are we going to replace people? That's not always the best proposition, but it's funny because when we go to the commercial guys, they're always understaffed. They're always understaffed with quality people. They're always understaffed with trained people. And so one of these guys is actually, he told me how he goes around after his beekeepers do the work. He goes around and does the rounds to make sure that the work was actually done to the level of quality that he would want it to. And he always undoes what they did, or has to fix some stuff, because it's hard to get your hands on quality beekeepers and keep them around for a period of time, so that there's consistency in quality and service. And so again, when you deal with manual labor, That's a problem. So we're not really replacing hands. We're actually filling up those hands that are missing. And if you do have quality beekeepers, keep them on board. Don't let them go. Make sure they're the ones making the decisions and carrying out your beekeeping to the level that you require. But they can do much more. And the other thing is, what our customers are thinking about is how do they expand their operation, right? So, yeah, you don't want to really get rid of people. Now you're thinking, okay, I have the labor, I have the trained quality labor. That's a fantastic because getting your hands on more colonies is a relatively simple logistical task, right? Buy more colonies. But it's the management of those colonies and how do they generate revenue and how do you deal with it? That's the hard part. But if you can throw them in devices and get them going, well, now it's a whole different story.
That's a much better way of looking at it. I like that a lot, and it makes much more sense. What have we missed on this? What's the point that you want to make sure people get?
Again, I want to make sure that we're talking to beekeepers and beekeepers are listening in, but we should never forget that part of this is we're talking about bees. Now, the bee is our customer. They're not a paying customer. They're our user. We literally designed this device with the bee being in the center. So what happens is, the old device, right, the wooden box, the 150-year-old wooden box was designed in 1850 for their needs back then. Well, the needs changed. The market evolved, right? Demand has gone up significantly for pollination services and for honey. But the underlying infrastructure, the technology, the way we do beekeeping, not only hasn't changed, we're actually losing the colonies. Supply is going down. In the US, there were 5 million colonies only 40 years ago. Today, we have less than 3. So supply is going down, and we see that with pollination prices and all that. And so we should never forget it's if you really want to succeed in building a device that grows bees and keeps bees, the bee has to be in the center. And this is how we built everything. And when you have the luxury of redesigning the technology, you can literally solve a lot of problems that were inherently unsolvable with the old device. You can't put cameras in the old device, in the wooden box. You can't put robotics. You're really limited in what you can do. So that's one thing. And based on that, when I said we have less than 10% colony loss throughout a year at scale, what I'm really talking about is we're saving the bees. We say colony losses, it means lost revenue. But in the real world, outside of the beekeeping world, what that means is on this planet, we are literally losing the bees by the millions every month. You guys know these, the numbers better than I do. So for us, the first and foremost, we build a technology that can actually save bees at scale. And again, the actual number for us is 7.59, the average of how many losses we have. And that's a KPI for us to improve on every iteration. Every iteration, we need to see that number go down and down. And this includes Varroa and all that. I mean, our devices are, in Israel and the US. It's not that they're in Australia where Varroa doesn't exist. We are actually in the hardcore markets where we see these losses cross the 40% line, and we're trying to solve for that. If we can solve for that, then we create real value to the commercial beekeepers because they're using the bees for a commercial scale, and we solve the bee collapse problem that is an issue that people care about. I care about, and many, many people care about that.
Well, it looks like from everything I've heard here, you've gone a long way to accomplish all of those things. So it's very impressive. I'll take 2. How's that? So, Saar, this has been great, and we wish your operation the best. I don't think you need good luck. You've got it handled. And I expect to see several of those things in my backyard in the next year or 2. So,
anybody that doesn't think they need luck, they need a quick lesson of humility.
Well, there you are.
We're trying to change the world, and so we need a lot of luck. And thank you for the kind words and for the opportunity to be here and kind of educate you a little bit more about our service.
This is really exciting technology, and I've often joked about beekeeping is an industry that hasn't really changed since 1850. And so this is the first real change I've seen in the 4 years. Well, since I've been a beekeeper, in the 4 years of doing the Beekeeping Today podcast, it's really, really innovative and holds a lot of promise. So I look forward to hearing great things from Beewise and to having you back at a future date to give us an update on a regular basis. And maybe next time we can have you and a beekeeper who's using one of your bee homes on the show at the same time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Saar. Kim, if I could combine my IT background and beekeeping, I'd go work for those guys today.
I don't blame you. I'm glad I was sitting down during this because it's pretty incredible what these guys have accomplished. And, I spent some time on their webpage looking, and there's not a lot of pictures, but they're looking at their pictures. And one of the things that he said, or you said, is that beekeeping hasn't changed in 150 years until now. Mm-hmm. It's changed. This is way different. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of questions I wanted to ask, but just there's so little time from an operational standpoint. In terms of he says the robot extracts the frame and they can take pictures and everything without the bees. So my first question was, how did they sweep the bees off that frame without killing them, and then put them back in without killing them?
That occurred to me early on, and I didn't get back to it. But you're right. We'll have to see if we can have him explain that a little bit.
Yeah, and then just maintenance of the box is kind of an interesting puzzle too, because I just spent this last weekend just extracting the last of my honey, the summer crop, and anybody who extracts honey knows that becomes a mess no matter how careful you are. So I'm imagining this bee hut, they're extracting 8 frames of honey in this enclosed container. How often do you have to clean out the inside of that container?
There you go. Good question.
So there's, and the other question was, is it self-contained power? How much power does it take to operate this?
Well, it's solar powered. You take a look, there's panels on the roof. So I imagine they have some battery backup.
Interesting. And then, of course, you have to have wireless. You have to have some sort of internet connection. I don't know. It's so many questions. So I look forward to having Saar back and Beewise back. And, it's really introduces some changes for the commercial beekeeper.
Yes, it is. A lot of changes. Okay. Anything else, Jeff?
No, I think we're off to the future. That about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We also want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of this podcast. Check out their probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. And we want to thank Better Bee. Check out all of their great beekeeping supplies at www.betterbee.com. And finally, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
I think that about wraps it up, Jeff.
All right. I think I'm going to go find my book on robotics and get up to speed.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.